We are live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Police Accountability Board, Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. Public notice to access the meeting remotely. Join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using the URL in the public agenda packet. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 891-7458-9069. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live on was built on the territory of the Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of the Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all of the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shellland, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of the Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. With that, we'll go to agenda item 1, call to order and roll call.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, this meeting was called to order at 6:32 p.m. I'll now proceed with roll call. Chair Cayetano.
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson is absent. Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Lethwich.
Here.
Board Member Wells.
Here.
Board Member Edmonds.
Here.
And Board Member Williams is on extended leave of absence. On behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Hansel Aguilar, Data Analyst Saeed MD, our Investigative Clerk Danny Weinberg, and myself, Jose Murillo, Policy Analyst. On behalf of the BPD, we have Deputy Chief Tate joining us remotely tonight, and Lieutenant Bonaventure joining us here in person. With that, Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Jose. And next, we'll go to agenda item 2, approval of the agenda. Also, welcome to Daniel.
Thank you.
Does anyone have changes?
I move we approve. I'll second.
Okay, public comment? Speakers, well, I'll let Jose take this.
Perfect. One gets accustomed to it. So we'll now proceed with public comment. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. Currently, there are no physically present speakers, and at this time, we do not have any virtual attendees. So with that, Chair, we could close public comment.
Okay. Go to agenda item 4, approval of the minutes. Anyone have any changes?
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
And are there any objections to that motion? Seeing or hearing none, the minutes are approved.
Okay, item 5, audit staff report.
Okay, thank you, Chair, board members, audience, members of the public. Wanted to recognize last time I mentioned is Mental Health Awareness Month. We're also an Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Just want to recognize that. There's some brief updates, and we'll have to take any questions. The annual report is still under review. We did receive some feedback that we're going to be incorporated in and coordinated with the review committee for that. I'll explain a little bit more later tonight, but I just like to provide staffing updates. And last night we received a directive from council at the meeting, and that may or may not impact our function. So I'll discuss that a little bit later when that item comes up. Since our last meeting, we submitted the communication the board requested, to council, and we're en route to give the, policy, review, report to the police department. That was something that we weren't able to complete before, in between meetings, but, that's en route to them. Just a gentle friendly reminder, there's some NACO webinars coming up. The next one is the New World of Artificial Intelligence, Opportunities for Police Oversight and Practitioners. That one is gonna be on June 12th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So, if you want to look out for that. We also, in between that, we want to potentially, I think it's pretty tentative, but, it's almost being finalized. There's gonna be a regional meeting, that NACO in partnership with the San Francisco, Department of Police Accountability is gonna host for Bay Area, practitioners. And that's gonna be in July. We'll keep you updated as we get the details for that. And then there's an August webinar called Hate Crimes, Explicit Bias, Implicit Bias, Evolution of Standards for Decertification of Police Officers in California. So it's relevant to us. August 6th at 2 p.m. Again, we'll circulate this. We did already get a request for the June 12th webinar. So if you're interested, we'll have to sign you up. And you're also welcome to join us here in the conference room as we stream from here. And one other gentle update, the council did have an consent item for a new board member appointment. So that's going to be at the next council regular meeting, I believe. And we'll hopefully have them. Will they be available? The appointment?
They should, they should.
Well, I'll stop it there, see if there's any questions and we can answer them.
Questions? No. Okay, thanks, Director. Any other staff updates now? Okay, agenda item 6, Chair and Board Members Report. I guess I'll go first. I, along with the Vice Chair and the Director, had a meeting with the mayor and other interested parties last week, and we discussed the letters that we sent to council, and we can provide a couple more updates at that during the discussion of those items. But I did reach out to the mayor's staff and basically told them that they are always welcome to attend our meetings and to provide their input on any of the items that we discuss in real time so that we can consider their perspective as well. And that is always an invitation. And then secondly, I went to the council meeting yesterday and I spoke to give public comment on the controlled equipment report since it was on the consent calendar. And so I did that, and I can provide a little bit more background on that when we discuss that on the regular agenda item as well. Last thing is that I know for a fact that I will be unavailable at our next public meeting on June 12th, 11, something like that, June 11, yeah. Which is why I asked the director to send around a poll about June 4th. But if anyone is unavailable to meet on June 4th, then we're going to keep it on June 11th. I just want to sort of like touch base with people and you know, figure out if that moving that was possible. Those are my 3 updates. Great. Any other board member reports? No. Okay. Moving on to item 7, Chief of Police Report.
Good evening, everyone. Wanted to share just a couple things. We've noticed that vehicle thefts are down significantly. This year, we've seen 208 vehicle thefts so far, which is a 57% decrease from the same time last year, which itself was a 23% drop from 2023. And that brings us back in line with historical norms after a post-2020 increase. Notably, our flock alert system has already assisted in 5 related arrests this month, which is fantastic. Briefly touching on staffing, no real changes, holding at 151 officers. We have 3 conditional offers out for police officers. Of those, we expect 2 will attend the ACSO Academy in June, with the 3rd one to attend the Contra Costa Academy in August. With our public safety dispatchers, we still have 17, with 3 new dispatchers starting training in June. So we hope to make an impact there. We do have 5 applicants and backgrounds. For those of you who don't know, in 1962, John F. Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day. And the week that it falls on, May 11th through the 17th, is National Police Week. So it's a time where we take the time to remember those who've lost their lives in the line of duty and to recognize those who continue to serve our community with courage and commitment. So last week we honored our brave men and women and the families who stand beside them. Our chief, honor guard, and members of command staff went and attended the Alameda County Peace Officers Memorial Ceremony at Lone Tree Ceremony in Hayward, along with our fallen Sergeant Jimmy Rutledge and his family to honor him. And we're proud to take part in this annual event. And just as a reminder for us always, not just this week, but that those sacrifices will never be forgotten. On May 15th, it was Bike to School Day, and as part of our engagement efforts, our Community Services Bureau, as well as our bike team, participated in Bike to School Day. And that's an annual event that's highlighted around the Bay Area as everyone celebrates that, basically the bicycling month. And that offers students and families a fun and healthy way to commute, also while strengthening their connection to the community. Our officers always enjoy the opportunity to engage with the students and families in that positive setting, and always look forward to the event every year. That was well attended. Just a brief update on the MOU compendium work. We're currently in the process of drafting the staff report, as I had shared at our last meeting. That staff report will capture all the proposed updates to the MOU compendium. The updates will include the formal removal of the general understanding section, and we'll have a restructuring of the compendium to ensure that it only reflects the active formal agreements that we have. And we believe that we're still on track to present the finalized changes to council prior to summer recess. And then lastly, our police department will be doing a budget presentation at the Budget and Finance Policy Committee tomorrow afternoon. We're going to be providing a presentation that will focus on overtime expenditures. It will give an overview of current and projected overtime use, likely addressing some of the budgetary drivers, staffing challenges, and operational needs contributing to our overtime. So with that, that is all I have tonight.
Thanks, Deputy Chief Tate. Will you answer a couple questions if board members have them?
Go ahead.
Anyone? No? Okay. I don't think I have any questions either, but I didn't realize that y'all were presenting at the budget presentation meeting. Is there has the department talked at all with the city about the hiring freeze and its effect on your staffing as well? Is that a point of discussion tomorrow?
I don't think that will be part of the discussion or focal point for tomorrow. I think it's really a comprehensive look at how overtime has been used in the past, sort of a historical context and where we are and what we project. And some of that will be based on an analysis of how staffing may drive overtime and whatnot. So I think that with all other department heads, I think that our department is, of course, in conversation with the city manager's office in regards to what the hiring freeze and impacts will be for us in particular.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Sure.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, subcommittee reports.
Thank you, Chair. I'll now go through the list of subcommittees, and if the subcommittees have any items to report since the last meeting, this would be the time to do it. We'll go ahead and start with the regulation subcommittee.
So the regulation subcommittee
the internal stakeholders, of which there are about 8, I think, met last Friday for 2 to 3 hours. And at that meeting, we also received counter proposals from the police union, the BPA. And we met again this morning internally, the 8 internal stakeholders, for 2 hours this morning. This is a slow and grueling process. We need to reach agreement internally before we make proposals to the union, and then have to meet again to discuss their counter proposal to us. So this is very time consuming, and we have, unfortunately, because the scheduling is so difficult with so many internal stakeholders, we were not able to get a meeting on the calendar, another meeting after this morning until the end of June. So this is going to take a while, is all I can say. Yeah, anything you want to add?
The only thing I wanted to add is that we are planning a closed session of the board on June 25th. And then we'll be able to discuss in greater details the issues that are in contention.
With the city attorney.
With the city attorney, we haven't figured out exactly who's going to be there.
Okay. Policy review subcommittee.
No update.
Okay. Metrics and operations. Okay. Outreach and engagement.
Chair Kataya and I are planning to meet on Friday to discuss, I think, the next phase of our outreach and engagement goal for 2025.
Then we could skip the last one as it's currently on hold regarding BP policy 1034. From our liaison list, any updates on EIS or FIP?
Nothing for EIS. Is that FIP is Vice Chair Wilson, right?
Correct.
Okay. Can't speak for her, so I don't know. So let's good on that.
Okay. And board member Calavito regarding the policy complaints, how much you want to provide any update that hasn't been?
No, you could probably do that better. You asked the department to see who would be the appropriate member for us to discuss the change with. That's the policy regarding whether it be possible to have a different officer respond to a call for service if the person calling for service is someone who's filed a complaint. So that's still ongoing.
With that, Chair, there are no additional updates.
Okay. Item 9A, overview of officer duties, responsibilities, work plan, and current projects.
Yes, so, Mr. Chair, this is an item that, was brought on by request of the vice chair, so, if it's possible, we can table it until further meeting, but I did want to take the time here just to give the brief update I mentioned. Last night at the council meeting, there was a discussion, on budget. We had a very, unfortunate reality that the city council was trying to grapple with. We have a shortfall, and one of the items that came up was whether other city charter officers were implementing the hiring freeze that the city manager announced. So we considered that that would be a possibility. We had not been asked by council, but last night council directed the city manager to work with the charter officers to have a discussion about hiring freeze. I was tuned in for that meeting, that I had already prepared something in case this came up. And I sent the memo that I'll share with the board. I just didn't get a chance to share before. I do have serious concerns about us having to implement a hiring freeze. I don't think we're going to meet our charter duties with investigations. And right now, those are the two main vacancies. We have an administrative manager vacancy. But if we cannot have those selections during this period, we're going to not be able to meet our charter mandate of the investigations. So I asked the council through that memo to allow us to be exempt. But if we are required to do it, I believe that the city manager's plan also has exceptions. And I also believe that we qualify for it. One is a public safety exemption, the other one is whether it's charter mandated work. So there's language in there that I think would allow us to utilize and ensure that we're able to clear our duties.
Chair, I have a question. I'm wondering if our staff get overtime pay if they have to work extra hours because of shortage of staff.
Yes, and there are limitations with that too, that in the memo I outlined the issue with that, and also we don't have in terms of cross training, our analysts are not cross trained to be investigators, so it's not like they can do that work per se. There's also limitations on the animal use that some of our analysts fall under. So there's a lot of legal labor concerns about navigators.
Great. The mayor, at the budget meeting yesterday made a comment about, our budget and how it's increased over the last, 5 years. And so, I think that this discussion will be important when we discuss it next time before the council meets. But I am planning on meeting, with the city manager to discuss, part of these exceptions as well. But I'm okay tabling it. Does anyone have any objection to tabling it until the next meeting?
No.
Okay. All right. So do we need a motion for that, or are we trying just to carry it over until the next?
Jose, can I lean on?
Yes, please. Just
You want a motion to table it? Okay. I move to table this until the next meeting.
My second.
Perfect. And are there any objections to that motion? Seeing or hearing none, the motion carries.
Okay. Item 9B, discussion action on a recommendation to city council to submit an amicus brief in the case of Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach for Sonoma County Sheriff's Office Director, and I believe we have a guest as well.
Yes, and I informed the board, I think different reasons, our office, and I think even the PAB members have expressed interest in this particular case as it impacts a broader work oversight. But there was an opening for us to potentially be involved in this discussion. Through our office, we prepared a memo that is in the packet that we try to indicate how it relates to our work. It obviously is a different jurisdiction, but if the courts do interpret limitations of the subpoena, we for one reason or another need to subpoena sheriff, whether in Alameda or another jurisdiction, we may have some barriers. So we believe that there was an opportunity for us as a oversight entity, but also as a city to be involved in this discussion. We do have the executive director, John Alden, as well, that he can speak more to it. But I don't know how you want to proceed, Mr. Chair.
Is John here?
He's remote.
Does he have a presentation?
I think he's available.
Does he, did you ask him to present?
Yeah, he's raising his hand.
Okay, yeah, please, go ahead. Hi, John. Good to see you.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on. Are you able to see me or no? So on my end, it looks, okay. I've been asked to join as a panelist. Let me do that real quickly. All right, that's a little better. At least you can hear me. I'm not sure why you're not seeing my video, but it looks, there we go. That's better. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you briefly. I'm the director of ILARO, which is a long and complicated name, basically meaning that we're the oversight agency over a sheriff's office, the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office here in California. Like many other agencies like yours, some of our powers come from a voter-approved initiative that was on the ballot. Ours was on the ballot back in 2020. And one of the powers that it gave to our office was the power to do independent investigations of certain kinds of things that might come up at the sheriff's office. Complaints by whistleblowers are one. Anything that involved a fatality involving sheriff's office personnel, like say a deputy involved shooting or a death in the jail, we can directly investigate, and a few other things. Now that we've had that subpoena power for a little while, we find ourselves in court on the first major test of the limits of that subpoena power. And there are, I think, two ways in which this might be of interest to you all in Berkeley, since you also have a police oversight system there and have some overlap with our system. And the two things you might find interesting from my perspective about our current litigation is that first, it raises the question of what happens when you have a voter-approved initiative and at the same time, a meet and confer process with a local public employee union. In our case, it's with the Deputy Sheriff's Association and also another group called SCLIA, which is an association that represents other people working in law enforcement who aren't on patrol, so like the people who work in the jail, for example. And whether if there's some conflict between that negotiated meet and confer agreement and the voter-approved initiative, which one controls? Now, to be clear, we're making the argument that in our case, the meet and confer agreements that help implement that voter-approved initiative don't supersede the initiative even just on their face. But our opponents in this particular piece of litigation argue that, in fact, it does, and in fact, that it overwrites several parts of the voter-approved initiative. And that's a position that I've not yet seen any California court approve. And I think for many people in local government, and particularly people in oversight, we would not want for a meet and confer process with a local public employee union to be able to trump the will of the voters. So from our perspective at ILARO in Sonoma County, we think that's an issue that's important to local government across the board throughout California, in many different contexts other than oversight, but especially in police oversight and law enforcement oversight, where this question of how exactly oversight and the obligation to meet and confer with police or deputy sheriff labor unions works together. So I think that's one reason why this piece of litigation might be of interest to you. Another is that it more broadly addresses the issue of how subpoenas that are granted to oversight bodies actually work in California. We've had some arguments in this case that perhaps the sheriff as an elected official is not required to comply with those kinds of subpoenas. Now, obviously, you're not overseeing a sheriff, and so that issue might be of less interest to you all. But I could imagine some ways in which that might have general applicability to all the subpoenas that are issued, say by Francisco or Los Angeles or other cities, or by an investigative arm like yours. So I think those are worth considering. I really appreciate Hansel's offer to have us come talk to you a little bit about the litigation. We are at a stage right now where we are in front of the first appellate district here in California. So this is a state court appeal. That appellate district covers and includes Berkeley and the Bay Area. Now that we have filed our brief, our opponents' briefs are due in a couple of months, maybe 45 days at this point. And there'll be a roughly 30-day window after that for amicus briefs to be filed. And so if the city of Berkeley or others out there in the public that just care about police oversight are interested in filing amicus briefs, the deadline's going to fall over the summer. So I know that's a lot, and I want to make sure to leave time for questions and some discussion if that's permissible. So I'm wondering if either Hansel, there's more that you might want to add about your process in Berkeley, about how you might get involved in an amicus, or if there are some questions I could answer.
Let's, Hanson, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I would just say procedurally, it's not that you would write it, you would make a recommendation that would go on to council, and the council would essentially instruct the city attorney's office to write it on behalf of the city.
Yeah, please, board member questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for presenting to us and good luck in your case. It was interesting what you were saying about the meet and confer process versus a voter approved, voter approved authority in which trumps, I hate to use that word, but which would govern. So that's interesting. I don't believe that the case has any direct implication for our board's subpoena powers, since the authority that you are acting under is the government code section, and we're acting under authority of the charter amendment. So I don't think that it's relevant there, and I don't want to suggest that it does govern, so that if there's an adverse ruling on your case and your subpoena power, I wouldn't want us to be suggesting that necessarily would limit our subpoena power. I also think that as a board, we need to be very judicious with our request to the city council. And I think we are going to be making some asks to council about our regulations, which, as board member Calavita said, it's been a very long and arduous process. And I think we will be asking council to weigh in. So I personally would not be in favor of us requesting the amicus brief. Besides, I think there's absolutely no way that the council would agree to that and would instruct the city attorney to do it. So I don't think we'd be successful, and I also don't think it would be that helpful to us.
Any other questions for John or comments?
I tend to agree with board member Leftwich. We have to watch the number of requests that we make to council. And lately our requests have not gone well. And therefore, I think it's very unlikely that this would be successful. And because we have had fairly recent discussions about our subpoena power, I would prefer not to re-raise the issue in this form. So I think it's really important what you're doing. I think it's unlikely that we could have a good effect.
Questions for?
Could I ask you also, was there a meet and confer process before the initiative went to the voters?
There was not. In our case, this occurred before I arrived in Sonoma County, but I'm informed that the county offered to meet and confer with the applicable unions. They did not take the county up on that offer. And then after the ballot measure was approved, there was further conversation about meeting and conferring, which eventually led to a meet and confer process that was completed about 1.5 years after the ballot measure was passed. So that's an unusual sequence of events.
No.
I think it's also unusual that you see a labor group decline to meet and confer before the measure actually goes to the voters, when there would be an opportunity to make a change. And that has been an issue of some discussion in front of PERB already, the Public Employer Relations Board, in this matter. I know I'm getting a little far afield from the issues raised in the appeal, but if there's curiosity about some of that sequence of events, I'd be happy to talk more about it.
The board member questions for John? John, I have a couple questions. Also, I don't know if you remember, but we met at NACL a couple times.
I do remember. It's good to see you again.
So, what other amici is ILARA soliciting right now in terms of institutional amici?
Well, we've put out a broad call to folks in oversight across the country and also people in California who've been active on police oversight issues in general. And so I don't know who is at the end of the day going to submit an amicus brief. It's well before the deadline for doing so, and there should be two briefs in opposition to ours that will be filed, one by the sheriff's office, and I would expect one from the Deputy Sheriff's Association. Neither of those are available yet. They just haven't been filed. And I would think many people who are considering filing an amicus brief would want to read both of those first before they jump in. I don't have commitments from anybody, but there's been a lot of interest, and we certainly welcome them. And I think um, it is a unique decision for each institution or each group as to whether or not they want to file an amicus. I recognize some of the factors that might underlie your decision as a board to recommend to your city council getting involved or not are going to be different from those in other places. So yeah, it's a complicated process. I'm appreciating the questions that you're asking each other in this regard.
Yeah, I guess I had a question about that. So there's institutional amici who could make submit a brief, but there's also, in our own capacity, whether as chairs across different commissions or as commissioners. Do you think that ILR would, welcome those as well?
Yeah, we'd welcome any amicus brief. And for anyone who's, might be watching this meeting or is interested in talking about that further, apart from the city of Berkeley's official decision to make or to file a brief or not, I'd be happy to get anybody who's interested in touch with our attorneys and find out a little bit more about how they think they may or may not be helpful in that regard, and what the deadlines are and what some of the arguments are that we expect and the like. So.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I would be like hesitant to ask, the city council, just because I'm not even sure that if we were to ask them to write an amicus on your behalf, that it would represent the interests of the PAB per se, as opposed to the city of Berkeley. Insofar as there is divergence there. And I have sense, there is a gap between what the council right now prefers or sees as even our charter mandate and the steps that we need to go through for our regulations, even given the fact that we went through meet and confer already, and what potentially we see as necessary. So, I would just be hesitant to submit that to them and just leave that to them to decide. So that's just my hesitation. But I really thank you for coming here and raising this. I think that we should have more opportunity to discuss, cross-jurisdictionally the issues that are facing different accountability boards. So I really appreciate you coming here.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
I have one more question for you.
Mhm.
Did Alameda County ever adopt the sheriff's oversight ordinance? I actually was working on the drafting of that a few years ago. We got so pushback from county council, and I lost track of whatever happened.
That's a great question. And I don't work for Alameda County, so I guess I can't say officially. But from what I've seen from publicly available materials, it looked to me like the Board of Supervisors last year did finally pass an ordinance on a first read and then sent it to the meet and confer process before they did a second read. So my understanding from what I've seen is that the Alameda County Board of Supervisors has directed staff to engage in the meet and confer process before finalizing the statute. So presumably they're in the meet and confer process now, as far as I know.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And, I might there's a tiny bit off topic, but for those who are interested in, finding more opportunities to work together with other people in oversight, NACOL, the National Association for the Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, is still looking at doing a regional event here in the Bay Area, July 24th and 25th. And you're certainly all invited to participate in that. I don't have a location yet, but those dates seem pretty firm, and I'm sure you'll hear more from NACOL's executive director, Cami McElhaney, once we get some more details set.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome.
I don't think there's any more questions for you, so we appreciate your time and your presentation.
Thanks. I'll log off then. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mhm. Bye.
Okay, any other comments, or action on this specific request?
If we may, just to close it out, and we get a vote, a motion and a vote, whatever. Which way you feel inclined to it.
I want to thank, before we vote, I just want to thank the director for your work on this, because I thought it was a really good memo, and it's a really important issue, and I think that there are many reasons why we might not go that way.
Thank you.
Are we waiting for a motion?
I kind of am waiting for one.
I move that we do not go forward with asking council to send the amicus brief.
I'll second that.
Are there any objections to the motion?
Let's take a roll call.
Go ahead with roll call, Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Board Member Wells,
Yes.
Board Member Evans,
Yes.
and Chair Kite.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Thank you all for that. And thanks again to John for being here. And Director for the memo. Okay, 9C. Recap, discussion, and action regarding the City Council's review of BPD's 2024 Controlled Equipment Report. The 15 minutes. Point of order before, what? Is there a reason why these are separated? Are they the same discussion?
Did we skip the, oh, sorry, is which one separate?
We're on 9C and 1 and 2. Do we need to take these in turn? Because I'm not understanding why they're separated the way they are.
There was a thought process there, and they just, no, they could be treated together.
Okay, we're okay to do that? Okay.
Yep.
All right, go ahead, Director.
Yeah, so we have, at the last meeting, we were instructed to just send a follow-up email to be clear that we were, alerting about the alleged violation or the perceived violation. And we did send that to the city manager, we served the letter. But since then, the council kept it on the consent calendar and without much discussion, I think only council member Luna Clara abstained because of the PAB letter and concerns, but it remained on consent and it was adopted or accepted.
I guess I have, were you finished with that?
Yeah.
Okay. I have like two options to present to the board. Based on what what happened yesterday in the council. And I really do think they are two options, and I would submit to you that we should have a discussion about which option is the most judicious and, you know, within the spirit of what we're doing here to pursue. So the first option is, well, the first option is we asked the department to produce records relevant to our review of the controlled equipment report, right? And the council decided to accept on consent the department's report. So we could let the chips fall where they are right now and not pursue the records, with the understanding that anything that we produce from our review of those records would not really make a difference to the acceptance or non-acceptance of the police department's report. So that's the first option. It's basically like to say, you know, we should move on because the issue is moot at this point. The second thing that we could do is we made a records request, and under our charter, 20A, you know, it says that all agencies officers, departments must comply with the records request. And in this case, that was not, that was not followed. And so 20C of our charter allows for us to subpoena records in order to perform our functions and duties. And that subpoena power is there for instances when, we're denied when we ask nicely. And so I guess my question for the board is, do we want to use our subpoena power in this instance to request the records that we did request? Body worn camera 911 calls, for those 5 instances that we identified. And one reason why we could do that, well, there's 2 reasons actually. The first reason is the Berkeley Municipal Code still asks us to evaluate and make a recommendation on, uses of controlled equipment, and to make a recommendation on the propriety of that use, and whether the use policy should be changed based on our review. The second reason is, just in the spirit of our charter and its place accountability, whether we want to set a precedent that when we ask for records, we won't follow through. And the department can say no because of, like on this particular point, they said no because of administrative burdens. So it's an open question. I think that we should discuss which action we should take, because there are 2 paths that we could take.
Chair, can I ask a question about the question, unfortunately?
No, go ahead.
Why did the city council accept the BPD's report?
So there was not much discussion at the actual council meeting. I can tell you from other discussions that there was a sense that the report itself was sufficient, and that there was no causes for concern on the face of the report that would require us to look further, to look deeper into the issue. And I guess I had 2 responses to that. One was, well, the board considered various things, and it was our decision, and in the charter, it's our decision to decide which records to request, not city councils, not the city managers, it's ours. And the second is that we were not actually, as we discussed, we weren't able to evaluate the factors that we were, playing with based on the report itself. So, those were, but I think the answer to your question is they weren't concerned with the report on its face. So, if they, there's a sense like maybe if there was some concern that they would support it, but not in this instance.
Okay.
I have a question of maybe the director, maybe the chair, or whoever knows. Did this report go first to the Public Safety Committee?
Yes. No, rules and agenda, right?
Yeah, it did not.
So it did not go to the Public Safety Committee.
Right.
But it went to the Rules and Agenda Committee. And were you there?
I was, yeah, there was
Was there some discussion there as to whether to put it on consent or action?
no,
So how was it decided to put it on consent and just pass it without discussion?
It's put on consent by the city manager, I believe. Right.
the author of the report can put it on. There's certain types of reports and consideration for the council that had to go to action first, but this was something which is put on consent. So that they just kept it.
Mhm.
I have a question about the administrative burden. So we were asking for records about 5 incidents. Do you have some sense of the volume of records? If their claim about administrative burden is legitimate, or do we have any sense of how many records we're talking about?
I don't have a specific answer to you. How many records, how much time it would take? I don't have an answer.
But it was 5 incidents and body worn camera footage, and what else?
911
Reports.
and police reports, yeah.
So there was a memo from the city attorney, if I'm not mistaken, that said,
You can't see what it said.
oh, All
We
right,
can talk about your.
so let me ask you this question. I don't have the ordinance in front of me.
Yeah,
But I seem to remember that the ordinance says that we are to, for each use, we are to look at various details. But those details were not within the report itself.
yeah,
And so it was our argument that we could not do the review that was mandated by the ordinance without seeing that raw material.
yeah. So I'll tell you what my enlightened understanding is.
Okay,
My enlightened understanding is that the ordinance doesn't require us to access these records, to request these records, but that we are allowed to under our charter, which allows us to access records to review Berkeley Police Department's policies, procedures, or practices.
I thought the ordinance said we shall.
I think that my enlightened understanding is that, because it says based on the report, that we should be able to do so based on the report. But it's an open question of like, well, what happens if the report doesn't enable us to do the analysis that we're required to do? I mean, like in that, we're just kind of like stuck.
And we were only asking for 5 incidents. How many incidents were there?
50.
50. Okay, so that seems like a pretty modest request.
So, if I could just speak to the administrative burden, I think there was also concern about treatment of these records. Are they treated as unredacted records you normally get, like personnel records you receive? Or do they need to be treated differently? And if they need to be redacted in some way, if there's a lot of on camera footage, a lot of records review, that is
You have a question?
I have another question.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Is this an issue of principle or is this an issue of pragmatism?
Well, I guess, I mean, let's kick it to the board members.
So the question was, is it an issue of principle
Right,
or pragmatism?
right.
I would say kind of both, because I think what I heard the chair saying is that it's too late probably for us to have any impact on, I mean, the report from the department has already been accepted by council. So whatever materials we might receive from a subpoena will not change that. But it's an issue of principle in terms of asking for materials that by charter we're authorized to have. And when denied, we simply say, oh, okay. So it's principle, but it's also pragmatism in terms of the next time.
Right.
You know, because this can't be a precedent that just always, we ask for things that are allowed us by charter, we're denied, and we go away.
Right. And so to that, this leads me to a conclusion of, this is more of an issue of trust. In the sense that the fear that we have is that if we don't issue a subpoena, then there's potentially another time.
Yes.
That we're asking for request for records and we don't get it.
Yes.
What I was saying is that I'm not necessarily confident that issuing a subpoena would necessarily change that.
I have one thing to what Board Member Calvita said. There's an element of pragmatism in terms of what we can do.
Right.
As well, and that is. One thing that is separate from the review of the factors that we discussed, you know, is that the code also says that if we determine that any controlled equipment has not complied with the standards for approval set forth in that section with all the factors, we shall recommend revocation of the authorization for that piece of controlled equipment or modify the controlled equipment use policy in a manner that will resolve the lack of compliance. And so we requested records specific to this, the LRAD, or like the flashbangs and LRAD price. And so, you know, pragmatically, we would be reviewing in order to ascertain whether or not to, what for compliance and whether or not there needs to be a modification of that policy based on this review. Like that's the pragmatic aspect of it as well.
So it isn't completely moot.
That's sort of what I'm getting at.
I guess, like, I understand the importance of this particular issue, and I think what I'm trying to find is like, what is a pathway, or what is the solution that I think that makes sense for ensuring that we have the full authority under the charter to do what we're supposed to do. My sense from the city attorney's office and even from BPD is that they look at it on a case by case basis. And so for them, if the report that BPD provided is sufficient for the city council, then they're making a decision that we don't need it in this particular instance. And so I would argue is just like, well, like, how do we establish this level of trust that when another issue or another instance come up, we do get the request?
I see what you're saying. I mean, I think we don't need approval for that. That's the thing. Like in our charter, there are certain things that are subject to council approval, that are subject to city manager approval, very explicitly. When it comes to like what records we request, what we issue subpoenas for, you know, there's expressly not a requirement that we go to any other department for approval. And I think the reason for that is because if we determine that we see an issue, we request records in order to figure out that issue. But then if someone else is approving that, then it means that it's their determination of what's an issue and what's not. But what I hear you saying is that, you know, we have to be forward looking about making sure that our request itself prior to the subpoena are respected. And I don't know in this instance that it would be, because if we were to request records next year for the same thing, I imagine the same scenario would play out. There's no, I mean, to me, to like going forward next year, if we were to request records to review this report, you know, next year I would probably say we should issue this immediately because we know what they're going to say. And so we're in a different time now, though. We're in 2025, so I don't know if that addresses your exact concern, but
Did you have any, something in the back of your mind that, could facilitate that kind of trust? I'm not sure. I mean, where do you land then?
I guess where I land as a relatively new board member is that there is a perception of the Police Accountability Board that our authority is too expansive. And that there are ways in which they like to dance around limiting the authority that we have. And some of that I do think is rooted in an old perception that is a lack of trust. And so where my mind goes is, how do we as a board reestablish a stronger level of trust interdepartmentally, whether it's with BPD or the city attorney or even our fellow city council members, so that when we are making a request, that there's greater trust and greater credibility that we have than where we are today.
to that.
I'm trying to formulate my thoughts. Yeah, I think, you know, also as a very new board member, I don't know if I've seen any of it. I just haven't had visibility here. I don't know if I've seen enough to understand why there's a trust issue or like why the issue is trust. It seems that if we were asking for a pretty specific sort of set of materials, it doesn't appear overly burdensome. And I don't think we got a lot of dialogue or rationale why, or other than the burdensome, that it seemed could be a resistance to oversight more than the trust issue. So one of the questions I did have was how often this happens where we ask for materials. And they don't, and like, so.
Well, there was a long record of history of this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, sort of echoing board member Calvita's question of if there's a good option to sort of establish trust or such, or to make some connection, I'm open to that. But it just seems to me from things I've heard, there's just a resistance to oversight. And part of me is like, well, what are the tools we have in this situation? It seems like it's subpoena.
Yeah, the question that I have about trust is like, well, what if they're opposed to the records request on principle? And it's not a matter of like, well, if you had a good reason. Like not speaking to the council members, but more to the department. I don't think that they would say, if we trusted you had a good reason, we'd give them to you. In that instance, you know, so. But I agree with the spirit, you know, with building trust, but I don't know how we get that until we get to the playing field that the charter sort of sets forward. And also there's something to say that, I mean, like, I don't know about trust with the people who, you know, voted for this charter, who 85% said, we're gonna give you this power, we're gonna ask that, what about the trust of every other city department who, and the voters, you know, where they said, yeah, you have to comply with the requests of the Police Accountability Board. I don't know, like that's, it's not just, you know, there's a lot of considerations floating around, I guess.
I mean, sure, we can use the language that it's a trust or resistance, and I'm sure it's probably some combination of both. I think what I'm still sort of getting at is, I think we just need to be strategic about how we view our city power.
That's true, definitely true.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I see both sides of it. But I think we need to be strategic too. And maybe going forward, we issue the subpoenas rather than making requests. Now, I guess well, we haven't finalized the regs yet, but the process that we've been working on would require, you know, a request that's declined before we issue a subpoena. So maybe if we have a request and say, you know, have very specific timelines and say we will be.
But that wouldn't govern a policy request or a subpoena for a non-complaint issue.
Oh, that's true. We're being very clear that these regs only govern complaints. So
That needs to be
you're right.
very clear.
Yeah, you're right.
I think it is both a matter of trust, and resistance. But I think the resistance comes from a sense, I mean, I have heard both at council and elsewhere that our asking for records implies that we don't trust the department. That they've done their report. Why do we need to see behind the scene? And the answer is because we are the oversight body. And it's not that we don't trust, in the case of the controlled equipment report, it's not that we don't trust that you're being truthful or that there's anything nefarious going on. But either you want an oversight body or you don't. And it's our job to do oversight. And it's not because we don't trust the department. You know, so the issue of trust sort of goes both ways. But I have heard council say, why are you doing this? Don't you trust the department?
Right.
That's not our job.
I agree, and I would agree with you, and my argument would be that we serve as an accountability mechanism to the police department for the historical actions of the police department. If certain actions didn't happen, then a civilian oversight would never exist, so we do exist for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do think that we can do a more effective job that when that question comes up, why are we asking for more information and not taking the police report at face value, that we're very specific about the concerns or the issues that we have and the reasons why we want the additional.
It's just we don't know what we don't know. And if we're asked to give our blessing to a document and we can't evaluate the conclusions without more information.
Sure.
So that's one of our obligations and duties.
I want board member Matriarch was trying to say something, so I wanted to give you a chance.
Yeah, I'm curious what the tools are at our disposal now. And it seems like, again, we could sort of do nothing. We could issue a subpoena. Like, what are the other, is there anything else we can do?
I don't see anything besides those two. I mean, like, so if we send a strongly worded statement to council, I already did that. I mean, like, I went there on Tuesday and tried to give one.
Yeah, and just to board member Calamita's point, that like it's an interesting argument to say, push back and say like, why don't you trust us when you're asking for these? You can also flip it and say, well, if you share these records with us and show that you are performing things as you were summarizing, then we can
Then we would trust.
It will establish trust if there's more transparency.
Yeah, trust comes through. That's a great. Sorry.
Trust through transparency.
It's a good point. Let me add another element to this conversation, which is that usually it's been my practice, and someone asked me this question recently, like, at what, like, do you have a time in which you subpoena a record as opposed to request a record?
Mhm.
And what I said to this person was, we don't have a specific like protocol, but I have a general practice. And my general practice is, and the one that I've seen the board perform over the course of my time here, is that we go from requesting records to demanding records to subpoenaing records. And that's like a natural progression of what we do. And in this instance, with the way that the controlled equipment report played out, was we were going down that process. You know, we requested records, we made a request from the board, and we were in the process of demanding the records, as in sending a formal letter to the chief. And then she submitted the report to the council before we could even subpoena anything. And usually, like, I want to give it like 60 days before we get to subpoena, just for the sake of like, you know, institutionally working things out. But that process was completely short-circuited here because
60 days is a long time.
I know, I don't want to throw a
number.
number. I don't want to feel like so, and I think like that to me frustrated me. Because there's no requirement that she submit the controlled equipment report to council before we review it. In fact, it says that she has to submit it after we review it. And so I'm like,
You're frustrated, you got outmaneuvered.
not outmaneuvered. I mean, like, it was just like I was like, don't submit this report until we review it, and she did. So I mean, like, I was like very clear. And then so like she submitted it, and then she invited a supplemental response. But that supplemental response couldn't say anything except, look, we haven't reviewed it yet. We can't review it. And so like, yeah, I will say that frustrated me. And this,
Which is fine, I mean, that's fine,
Yeah.
I'm not,
yeah.
I think that's a genuine, honest response. It also doesn't sound like that's a relationship of trust.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess like, I want to like take a temperature check on where we're at. I don't, I'm hoping that, we can make a unanimous choice one way or another, but I sense some hesitance. I heard a suggestion from board member Lethwich about, doing it next year.
Well, I'm just thinking, so if we do issue the subpoena, and this raises the conflict of interest issue, because the chief would probably move to Washington.
Mhm.
And so then we would need independent counsel to represent us. This would go to the judge. And the city attorney presumably would represent the department. And they would need somebody to represent us. I'm just trying to, see this down
No,
the.
but the city attorney has already stated, that we have access to those records.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah,
Okay, well, again, it's a conflict of interest. So maybe the city attorney represents us, and so. And I'm just trying to think of. I'm not opposed to using our subpoena power, but I do want to be strategic about it. And I guess I would feel better if there had been a letter saying, we want these records. If we don't get them in 20 days, we're going to be issuing a subpoena.
I mean, I explained to you what couldn't happen in this instance.
Right, no, I'm looking forward. I'm also trying to look forward. So I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence.
I would issue a subpoena for records for a report that has already been approved by the city council.
Well, can I ask, like, what is the concern? We issued a subpoena. What effect are we concerned about?
I guess I want us to be successful, and so I want us to be careful when we proceed aggressively, and it is our right. But I also think that I would rather do it in the case where it wasn't arguably moot, even though we could, there are some things that the chair said that make it not as moot. But the fact that council's already approved the report, isn't helpful. So, because we can't do anything retroactively about that report.
Yeah.
The thing I'm so struggling with is I can understand not feeling like issuing a subpoena is a perfect option. I don't think it is, to your point, it's largely moved. But I don't see a better option, because otherwise we do nothing. I do think that sends a message that, hey, we didn't provide the records this year, we're not gonna provide them next year.
Let me subpoena them early next year.
We could. Do we increase, like, even one of the reasons I'm leaning toward a subpoena is, does this at least sort of reset expectations for them going into next year, that they understand like, oh, we didn't abide by the request here, they've issued a subpoena, they do feel strongly about this, so next year we will be more willing.
And let me add some context to that. That's a good point, because there were council members who asked us, well, what have you requested in the past? And it was hard to explain to them why we were requesting records when in the past, we had said.
On this particular report.
So there is a question of historicity and, continuity of practice. So it is a.
But I think that's my point, is. Again, there is a perception that we ask for a lot, that we just ask for a lot of stuff. And it's not clear why we're asking for it, what we're doing with it, we just want it. And sometimes it's a burden, and we're just not gonna give it to you, and other times it's like, we're just gonna outmaneuver and go to the city council. So for me, is that we can agree to issue a subpoena, and I think it will just make it that much harder every time our director is sending a request for information to get it. That may result in, we're gonna always have to submit a subpoena. And so I just think that it's a department that we have to continue to work with. And I think that going forward, I think there will be another reason to actually have to issue a subpoena, and not for a report that has already been approved by the city council.
So Chair, are you, you feel very strongly that we should issue a subpoena? I mean, you said there's two options. So which
There are two options. I mean, I guess I don't wanna. I was hoping that, going into this, we could be unanimous in issuing a subpoena. So I'm really hesitant to do so, if we don't have the full support of the board,
But you would like to do it.
I think the reason, there's one reason. Not one reason, there's many, I've said many reasons. We've requested many records, and every time we've been told no. And we've been very judicious, I would say, in the past with our subpoena power. And we've been pushing our ability to do so off every year, actually. It's been 3 years since the charter has been, 4 years actually, since the charter has been passed. And every year we've said next year. And, at some point we have to draw lines in the sand and say, look, this is what our power is, and you have to respect it. And then we will begin to establish that relationship on those terms, not the terms that you're setting, So I think that's why I'm viewing it from an institutional lens of that this has been going on for 4 years, and here we are now. And we could pass it off till next year, and we might have a different composition of the board next year. And who knows what, there's a whole.
Well, we wouldn't have to necessarily be pushed off to next year, because that's just regarding this particular report.
Right.
It could be the next time we want documents, right?
It's true, that is true.
Doesn't mean it's a whole year.
That is true. But to answer your question, I'm leaving this. Director, did you wanna?
Yeah, I thought you were gonna make the point here, but last night I thought that was also a helpful point for council to know. That there's another civil report down the line, which is the military equipment report. So there's some overlap. So where it might be moved for the controlled equipment, there might be some of the same incidents reported there and there's still a lot of analysis. So there might be some use to still.
And we have the same duties.
Not the same duties.
What is our obligation vis-a-vis that?
Not really, they have to,
Yeah.
so, but there is language about the police accountability that you have to review the items in the same way to control equipment, but not the report itself. But there is a requirement for a public meeting, that the department has to have.
And we talked about us possibly,
Posted that.
yeah, right.
So I guess, okay, so I think we need to bring this to a soft landing. I don't know where we're at. I mean, I can count, but I guess I would just ask for a motion in one way or another, maybe even two motions. Unless there's more like
Well, as I said, I'm kind of on
considerations
the,
there.
I'm kind of on
Yeah.
the fence about it, and I wouldn't be upset if we issued a subpoena. I'm just not sure that this is necessarily the right time, so.
I can absolutely understand the wanting to be very intentional about when we issue a subpoena. If we've had this history though of asking for records and it not being abided by, I don't know if we need to find the perfect time to issue a subpoena. I mean, this feels like if I'm looking at this, whatever perspective, like this feels like a pretty clear case where material was not provided that should have been. Again, if we're not going to issue that, again, you can probably tell I'm obviously the nature of issuing a subpoena, but if not that, like what? I think that's still what I'm trying to, if it's just waiting until another opportunity, we may issue a subpoena. I don't know if I see the great benefit in that.
Well, Chair, could you remind us again about why this isn't completely moved? What are the opportunities?
Yeah, so there's two things. Well, one main thing, I would say. Let me just pull it up. Oh, sorry. Okay, so we can still review. If the Police Accountability Board determines that any controlled equipment has not complied with the standards for approval set forth in that section with the list of three, it shall either recommend revocation of the authorization for that piece of controlled equipment or modify the controlled equipment use policy in a manner that will resolve the lack of compliance. Recommendations for revocations shall be forwarded to City Council in accordance with the approval process set forward in a different provision.
But is what you're reading separate from?
Yes,
Oh, that's a completely separate authority
I mean, it's a separate provision. It's a separate-
from our obligation to review the report. Is that?
I don't know, I don't know the answer.
Oh, okay.
It's a separate provision. I think what's different about this one is that it specifically mentions the controlled equipment use policy. And so, you know, if we're reviewing, for example, we requested all the records about flashbangs. I don't remember the last time the board guys reviewed the department's use of flashbangs and aligned on whether that use, their use, which is outlined in this report, complies with the use policy. And so this would be an opportunity for us to do so and to submit a report, even if it's a report saying, yes, they're doing great. Like, look, everything aligns with what the use policy says. We fully accept, we fully approve of the department's practice in this instance. And we offer no suggestions. I would feel very comfortable supporting that report, having viewed those records. And so
The subpoena would be issued with reference to whatever you just were.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, no, it would be under our 20A powers, but in order to conduct the review that's outlined right here.
The review of the report that has recently been accepted. by
No.
council.
No, to determine that any controlled equipment has not complied with the standards set forth in approval.
Oh.
Yeah.
Even after the fact.
Yeah, authorization for that piece of controlled equipment or modify the controlled equipment use policy. So I mean, like, there's an interaction here between the authority that we're requesting it under, the section of our charter, and the purpose for which we're requesting it, which is outlined in the municipal code.
well, would it be possible for us to issue a new request with reference to that? And then if we don't get that? Because it seems slightly different.
Why do you think that they're gonna say yes?
I don't necessarily think they're gonna say yes, but I think just kind of procedurally, it might be better because it's clear that it's not completely moot. And then
Well, that's another suggestion, I guess, to board member Evans' point.
third option, yeah. And say if we don't get it within X number of days, we will be issuing a subpoena.
Yeah, I can understand, how you could, yeah, that is, seems like it's cleaner procedurally, but. Yeah, I don't know if I understand how that will change their behavior, or like, what are we trying to change with? Requesting specifically under this versus.
I'm just trying to make it look like it's not completely moot and we're just issuing a subpoena because we're unhappy.
Look to who though.
Right,
Well, it's renewing the request, it's slightly different. It's a different request if we're going under this provision about the use policy.
But you're saying looking like who would you like to be seen as a new request by, like, I guess whose opinion or
My own, the public,
Yeah.
the court, I don't.
It's not different though, I mean, like, this is something that we would be evaluating. In the first instance, and we also specified it in the actual request 28.
I thought you were saying, based on what you were just reading, that this is something we still could do. Right, because we would be saying that the use policy, maybe I'm just confused about this other provision about why it's not.
Yeah, I mean, there's two separate provisions. One says that the department's report has to include our recommendations, and one says that we submit a separate, well, not a separate report, but then we forward our recommendation to council. So like both would be, I don't know how they work out. The thing is, we haven't even figured this out because we haven't even gotten that far yet.
I feel like we are extremely frustrated by the lack of response for our requests for materials. Not just this time, but previous times. And so, and the way this all played out in terms of being put on the consent calendar before we had an opportunity to actually get the materials that would allow us to review it. And so we're incredibly frustrated right now. But I'm beginning to think that maybe we shouldn't use the subpoena power this time. And that we should be judicious about it and strategic about it. And if we subpoena these materials now, we'll get the answer that, why do you need them? The report's already been accepted. And there's these other reasons why we could use them, it's true, but I'm thinking it might not be that favorable to us to submit a subpoena for materials that we requested before the city council action.
Can I ask favorable in what sense? Like favorable looking down toward what?
We're trying to build, as you put it, trust. We're trying to build trust, and I'm not saying that people have a good reason not to trust us. I disagree about that. But I don't think it is to our advantage to submit a subpoena at this point on this particular issue that was already decided. And I'm ready to do it next time. But I don't know that this is the moment.
And do it pretty quickly next time. I mean, set some very clear time frames.
Sorry,
No,
yeah, I think the trusting, I think I'm still struggling with, only because like how. Trust, but it has to be a two-way street, right? It's like,
Yes.
what are. I don't know how not issuing, I mean, maybe your concern is issuing a subpoena further deteriorates trust.
yes.
But like, I don't, there's, again, if we really want to talk about trust, like, I feel like we need an action that actually is going to build some trust. Like, it ultimately, the way I look at this relationship is, we can this is too simplistic, but we can sort of build trust and hopefully build trust to a degree that they will grant and share materials with us when we ask. Or we have to use other leverage that outside of that relationship. And if we've had a history of, and again, I'm open to, I know, Board Member Wells mentioned the perception of the Police Accountability Board being that we ask for things and don't sometimes justify it or such. Like, if that's an actual history, like, I'm open to hearing that, and like, okay, we can be better about specifying what we're asking and such. It doesn't seem like that was the case in this instance. It seemed like we were very specific. But like, I don't, it just seems like we've had a history where we have tried to establish trust and have acted in good faith, and it hasn't been reciprocated. And for me, I'm like, well, I don't know if the way to build trust in that instance is to like just maintain status quo. I think we may have to pivot to something different.
No, I agree, but, and I don't think trust is the right word either. I don't think we've done anything that should have eroded trust. I think we've been very professional and very reasonable.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a matter of, you know, respect, getting some respect and asserting ourselves as appropriate. So,
Okay, I'm gonna say Board Member Wells should say his last thing, and then we should probably vote. But
I was just say this. The words that I use is a perception of trust and probably a resistance to civilian oversight. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't use the subpoena. I just don't think that we should use the subpoena for a report that has already been approved by the city council.
right.
And I think every week, we are always asking for materials. I am confident that something will come up or we will request those materials. And I think when we issue a subpoena, it needs to be a more compelling argument that is in the public interest beyond the language that is in the charter.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
okay, I'm gonna ask for a motion.
What kind of motion?
Well, I think we should vote both ways, so maybe one motion first and the other motion second.
So I can,
You feel strongly about this subpoena, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Can you state your case again?
I think we're fighting ghosts when it comes to perceptions. I think,
Yes, I agree.
I think that the fight that we're fighting is, does Berkeley want police accountability?
Exactly.
And I think we need to ask it to affirm
Yes.
that Berkeley wants police, and that's why I want the petitions to be done. That's the.
How does that? I mean, I totally agree, because I don't, I'm not sure what.
Because I
whose
want to,
perception,
if I want us to make a request,
because
sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying, we do not willy-nilly ask for materials for no reasons. We ask for materials to fulfill our oversight duty. And from what I've seen in the last 3 years, frankly, the PRC, it seemed to me, had more powers than what's happening here. Since July in 21, when the PAB got off the ground, I have not seen any indication that the city leaders are interested in real oversight. Because we have been stymied at every turn. At every turn, whether it's a misconduct complaint or a policy complaint, or, you know, we have collaborated on some policy work, it's true. But what is incredibly frustrating for those of us who've been here for a while is that it seems apparent that people want us simply to trust the police to do the right thing, and I have great respect for this department. It's not that I don't, but we are the oversight body. And it looks very much like some of the leaders here do not want a real oversight body. They want it on paper. And that is what has been so frustrating. And to hear that there's the perception out there that we're asking for stuff frivolously or something, I don't know where that comes from, because we're very judicious in what we ask for. We often don't get it, in spite of the fact that charter says we're authorized to have it. So, you know, I understand their frustration completely.
So I guess like, two things. One, I asked the director, and I think that my request was maybe misunderstood, to list out situations when we ask subpoenaed records and the department, like specific instances. And when we have done so, they have complied. So I don't think we should, no, I'm 25, but it doesn't say, it's not
Yeah.
this is an overview, it's not
Right.
what I had asked for. So I think there's not a precedent that they're gonna move to quash it. I think that they've complied for our request for records in the past, when they've been, I mean, like, I don't know if we need to expect that from them. And I also, the second thing I was gonna say is, I feel very comfortable posthumously submitting a report to council with our findings for what they would have been. Even if it goes into the void, I feel comfortable saying that in fulfillment of our duty, we're submitting the report that could have been. Maneuvers be damned. So I do feel strongly about it, but I also I respect the board's decision as a whole. And I do want us to vote. And I want everyone to vote, their own way, I think everything has been aired out at this point, really, I do. So I'm gonna ask for a motion, maybe even two motions to vote both ways up and down, so.
Yeah, I can move to issue a subpoena for these records.
Second. Okay, let's take a roll call.
Okay. So on the motion to issue the subpoena for the records related to the 2024 controlled equipment report, start with board member Calvita,
Yes.
board member Lethwich.
This is a motion to issue us.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Okay, board member Wells,
No.
board member Evans,
Yes.
and Chair Cayetano.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion carries with 4 votes in favor, 2 votes against.
I think you did your math wrong.
That's not,
Did I?
that's a law.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, sorry, my apologies. We're at 5 members today.
Can I ask, just point of order, board member Wells seconded the motion, and then he voted no, that's okay, right? Okay, just making sure.
Huh.
I assume that was good.
No, I wasn't sure either, I just wanted to make sure.
So we don't need the second. Why do we need this? We don't need to go through a second motion. You had said you wanted a motion.
No, we don't, it was in case the other one failed.
Okay.
Yeah, just to make sure we're clear.
As I said, I'm not upset about that. I was very torn.
That's it, yeah.
I was torn too, and I'm on the fence.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a lively discussion. And what was that?
So I was gonna with you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the board's engagement, and I understand that there are two sides to this, and I'm happy when everything is aired out as it has been, so thank you for that. Okay, moving on. 9D, this is board member Lethwich's item, so I'll let her take it.
Yeah, I'm not sure why my name is on this. I don't have any update, but I can provide a recap of where we are in this. So this issue came up during the labor negotiations in response to union proposals to, one, require the chief to retain records relevant to complaints, and 2, to require our board and the ODPA to delete those same records within specified time periods. And so the question arose, at least for me, is how long currently does the department and how long currently does ODPA retain records? Because if they retain them for a long period of time, that's fine. You don't need to worry about, the chief will be retaining things if it's for a long time. If it's a short retention period, so it just raised those issues. So we were advised that the clerk is in the process of updating the city retention schedule, and that staff is going to reach out to the clerk to find out the timeline for that process, and to communicate that our board wanted some input on the schedule. So we also learned that the ODPA follows the PRC's retention schedule, which is to retain materials indefinitely. And during our labor negotiations, there was some suggestion that perhaps the ODPA and the city should have, or the department should have similar retention schedules. So I personally still don't think we have enough information to make a recommendation on the regulations or on the policies, because I would want to know, I don't know that much about retention schedules. I'd want to know what the best practices are in other jurisdictions. What does NACO recommend? Because one scenario that I thought about, and I don't know the answer, is, well, what happens if an officer is the subject of a sustained complaint and then leaves this department and moves to another department? If during that second department's hiring practices, if there's a short retention schedule, would that mean other department not even know about that complaint had been sustained against the officer? So, you know, again, I don't know that much about it, but it just raised issues. So I don't have an update. I'm just kind of reiterating how this came about.
Just one update from Ryan, on May 13th, we did send an email to the clerk's office. We haven't heard back, but we can circle back to speak. But essentially laying out the past interest in reviewing their retention schedule and providing an opinion.
And do you have any sense, I guess you haven't had a chance to look into it, the question of what would be an appropriate retention schedule, right, for the department?
Yeah, I haven't. What other entities do? One thing though that I'll just flag, which I still an open question for me, again, everything was PRC, and I mentioned this last discussion, but so it was one entity, so one custodian, but now in this hybrid format, specifically when it comes to a personnel record. Once we give our findings to the board, our findings are our record, the office, but then when you affirm, modify, or reject, does that create a new record and you're the custodian, or is still the same record? And so I think that's an area where I would like to, not necessarily here, but us to land somewhere.
Well, and I want you to think institutionally, what do you think is appropriate as far as what records you retain?
Right.
Because I don't think our board per se, if it's like you know, we had a hearing on a complaint, sure, we'll give the records back. I don't think any of us need to hold on to that, but it's more institutionally what's reasonable.
Yeah, well, we can still be your sort of physical custodian, or if it's your record, so to speak. So we would just take it back from you, we don't have to worry about that. But are we actually treating it like two separate sort of?
Right. And that was it.
Did you have any recommended action, or is it just like?
No, I guess the director said he was gonna follow up with the clerk on that request. And I guess I would love staff to look into this issue some more, so if we find out there's a quick timeline, that we at least have some recommendation.
Are there any comments from board members on this? No? You're okay with moving on then?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for looking into that for us. Okay, 9E, discussion and action on resubmitting to City Council the PAB's recommendation to adopt the standalone arrest for the ban as outlined in 2024 report. Director.
Yes, so one of the things that we learned from that presentation was that it wasn't in a format where they thought they could do something. I think there was a commitment from you, Chair, to go back to the body, and especially because a lot of these recommendations, particularly the ticket one, the arrest order one, was very well researched. So we were trying to just circle back on that. You don't have to take action today, but we took the initiative to prepare what would look like a standalone submission. It's subject to your review and your modification, but we just want to bring it back to the body again for next steps and guidance.
I like the idea of it. I don't know, I wouldn't include the draft ordinance though, because the resolution is asking that we work with the department on crafting the language, right? So I wouldn't include that. And I also had some questions about the informal quota. I didn't think there was, I thought that language needed to be worked on. So I think it makes sense to go back to council on this discrete topic, but I just wouldn't include the draft
The draft language for the policy.
language.
Okay.
Other comments?
But as I understand it, Director, you're proposing that we ask council to oh, I see. But maybe what we should do instead of asking council to pass a resolution is attempt to work with the department like we do on all policy
Yeah.
issues. So not send anything to council at this moment, but see if the department would be willing to work with us on drafting a standalone policy. That would be best in my mind, because if they're willing to work with us on that, then we don't have to involve council.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
The only thing I said, and just because of where we are and work plans and workloads, the benefit I see, if it's a council mandate, it has a little bit more teeth to it. Now we know that the department, and even us, have constraints and everything, but if council's mandating us to get together and give something by a certain date, then that has a little bit, not that can be developed collaboratively with the department, but I think that was the thought behind that, going through that process.
How about if we attempt first to work with the department? And if somehow, because of workload or because they think it's a bad idea or for whatever reason, then go to council. I don't know. And on other policies, we attempt to work with the department.
Yeah, I agree. I think my question would be, if we were to work with EP directly within a reasonable amount of time that I would defer to you on, if progress isn't made, then you come back to the board if we can vote or decide if we want to include the city council.
yeah. This is pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
I mean,
think
this is a pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. And we have a draft policy already.
What does the vehicle code say? Because you referenced the vehicle code that,
So that was the gap in this case, that the quota is referencing the vehicle code, but not a.
but regarding what does the vehicle code say?
It talks about citations and fines.
Ticket quotas.
For traffic violations.
Okay, because we had something in the, there was a reference to parking enforcement employees, but that's outside of the vehicle code. On page 34, ticket quota means,
Oh,
That's because parts of BPD policy refer to ticketing quotas already.
yeah.
oh, okay,
But we can get into this. I agree with what has been said by the board members. I guess my only question would be procedurally, how should we go about, reaching out to the department? I think that they know that this is on our radar. Traditionally, this would go through the policy subcommittee, but we have, in that subcommittee, different priorities right now. And so, yeah, it's kind of an open question about what's the best way to work with the department on this. Should we have, a subcommittee for this? Should we ask the director policy subcommittee to prioritize this? Should we?
well, let's just reach out first to the department and say that the board would like to move forward with collaborating with them on this and just see what their response is.
But who would do that? I guess is my question.
Well, I would ask staff to do that. Or it could be from you, a memo to the chief. Saying that the board considered this, something like that. I don't think we necessarily know now who's gonna do the work if they say yes, because this is very straightforward. This isn't like a lot of the policy, so.
Well, I think the other question is there anybody who wants to work on this?
And isn't already over, well. Because Julie and I
I know
are
you guys are.
so busy on the regulations
Yeah.
and, I don't know.
I'm happy to work on it. I got a bit, but
Okay,
Done.
all in favor?
I guess my only question would be, thank you Paul, for saying that, do we want to have a subcommittee of two? So that the department can assign a liaison to, report back, or, happy to have Board Member Wells work with the liaison from the department on this discrete issue as well. I mean, like, I don't know.
Well, if somebody else has the bandwidth to do it, that leaves you to, to be the other subcommittee member.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested. I would like to just chat with the chair a little bit about the subcommittees maybe first and. But yeah, like I'm interested.
Well, this would be a good first one to get your feet wet, because it is pretty straightforward.
So you're saying you don't want to commit yet, is that, or you feel okay with? This one is like really straightforward. I do say that the lifts on this might be lighter, just because.
Yeah.
Unless, my only hesitancy on saying the lift is lighter is that, just from my experience, I can guess that they might have. Modifications to the implicit arrest quota section of the proposed policy.
That's the whole complicated.
It is complicated, there's policy issues there, but that's the type of thing that we work out in the trenches.
And you could also bring it back to the board, if you say we've met with them and we're okay with this, but they have concerns about this, and we could, we don't, it doesn't have to be done just in the.
Right.
subcommittee.
Okay, well, then I'll ask for a motion.
I move that,
We have to establish subcommittee, I guess.
and can we do that on the agenda?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, it wasn't an action item.
It was an so I think you're moving, generally speaking, to not send it to council standalone, instead to create a subcommittee.
All right, so my motion would be not to send a recommendation for a council resolution at this point, but that instead we form a subcommittee of two board members, Wells and Edmonds, to work with the department to try to establish a standalone arrest quota policy.
I'll second that.
okay, let's get a roll.
Okay. Get my notes. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Lethbridge.
Yes.
Board Member Wells,
Yes.
Board Member Edmonds,
Yes.
and Chair Gagnon.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay,
But then the next step, would the next step still be that you write something to the chief saying that we've done this?
I can tell her, yeah, I'll ask for a formal representative from the department to work with our
Good.
subcommittee.
Perfect.
And I'll copy you guys. What was that?
I was just saying, look at that unanimity.
Yeah, no. Okay, thank you all for that. 9F. Continue discussion and action regarding BPD's mutual aid agreements with federal immigration officials. This is me. The only reason I really wanted to put this on here is to follow up on Deputy Chief Tate's sort of like indication that they're going to be presenting the compendium. And to sort of reflect, I guess, for the board on the meeting that we had last week. During which, the Chief Lewis said basically what Deputy Chief Tate has been saying, which is that there is no agreement, it's a general understanding, which, take that for the distinction that it is. And that policy 415 governs. And so what I pointed out to, Chief Lewis was that policy 415 says nothing about when the department and interact with immigration authorities for a non-immigration enforcement purpose. You know, we've talked about this, right? This is what our letter was about, the law enforcement purpose. And I wanted to highlight for the board that there were 2 articles that came out recently. One of them was in Berkeley side, one of them was in the New York Post. The one in Berkeley side pointed out that ICE officials are conducting welfare checks. Not immigration enforcement checks, but welfare checks. That would be an exception.
On children.
On children. That would be an exception to an immigration enforcement purpose that's not covered by policy 415. What are we gonna do about that? That's the first thing. The second thing is that the Trump administration knows what sanctuary city policies say across the board. They know that they say for immigration enforcement purposes. And so they found a workaround, which is now they're criminally charging undocumented people for immigration offenses, for illegal reentry, for example. And so they're getting now criminal enforcement, AKA law enforcement. And so that falls on the same exception that we've discussed before. So I guess like my point is that we should be paying attention to policy 415. And my request is that, you know, we review policy 415, but my hesitancy right now is that I know the city council and the city attorney is rewriting the sanctuary city policy. So it might be premature to suggest we rewrite policy 415 until that has been finished. But I did just want to leave this item on the agenda to provide you that update and to give the board members opportunity to speak on it, on policy 415 or ask any questions about that, about the conversations that we've been having. But I don't think that there's necessarily action that needs to be taken at this moment, only to say that there is probably action in the future. And I know board member Ramsey said you might be interested in policy 415. So my hope is that y'all finish with the arrest quota policy before the city attorney comes back, and then you can transition. So that's my hope. But okay, but are there any questions, comments on what we're doing here?
I just have a question. The issues that you described in the New York Post in Berkeley side, has that taken place in Berkeley?
The Berkeley side one has.
Okay, and that's only one instance.
No,
Is it only one? I don't know the answer.
Okay.
I don't think so, but I also don't think it involved in any way the department.
No,
This was
right.
ICE.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing, like, by us pointing out gaps in policy, we're not saying that the department is doing something wrong.
Right.
I mean, I would be very adamant about saying that the department is doing something that it shouldn't be doing. But we're just pointing out where there's room for improvement. And I don't think.
Clarification.
In terms of policy.
Yeah.
Room for improving policy.
Sounding the alarm would sound very different, I think, but,
Yeah, but what I would also say is that we're highlighting a flaw in the policy that has a direct impact on our community.
yeah.
Like, it almost has nothing to do with BPD. It's the impact is on our community.
Yeah. Other questions?
What are the goals are they trying to accomplish with rewriting the sanctuary city law?
So I think that there was a resolution and it's sort of to bring it in line with that resolution. And I think that the biggest purpose is right now we don't have an ordinance. And so it's to write the ordinance. Maybe not necessarily to change anything from the way that the resolution is operating to the way the ordinance is. So let's say nothing changes in terms of the way it's operating, then we would still have the same issue. But there is a lot of advocacy going around like specific changes to the ordinances that might require changes to policy 415. We just don't know what those are yet. Yeah. Any questions? I don't know if Ken Bonaventure, you want to say anything on this? I know that there was a statement the department made on this, in general, but you don't have to say anything with it. Okay. Yeah, I think the department made a statement saying that they stand by sanctuary city values, which, I appreciate. I just wanted to bring attention to that here as well. And I don't think that's in distinction to what we were saying either. Okay, moving on then. Public comment, yes. Item 10, public comment.
Okay, As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but maybe allotted less time if there are many speakers. And to comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. Seeing that there are no physically present speakers here, I move on to our virtual attendees. At this time, if you're tuning in virtually and would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Or press *9 if you're calling in. Again, we're currently doing public comment. Please use the raise hand icon or *9 if you'd like to provide public comment. Chair, at this time, there are no hands raised.
Okay, moving on then to closed session, item 11.
For attendees, it's just a reminder, you're free to remain within the webinar. Audio and visual recording will be stopped and will be returned to closed session soon. And just one moment while I close up the
It is fine.
webinar.
What's going on with that?
Chair, we are live.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. The board affirmed the director's findings in one case, and that was it. All right. Moving on to agenda item 13, adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Great, thank you all.